And landowners in North Carolina may soon be forced to sell energy companies the rights to the natural gas underneath their properties. In Raleigh last week, state officials they approved a non-binding proposal which proponents argue would protect local residents from being uncompensated for gas inadvertently extracted from their own property. Now, environmentalists, on the other hand, they argue that the fracking recommendation forces property owners to sell the natural gas under their homes, whether or not they even want to. Joining me now from Raleigh to discuss the issue is Teresa Vick. Teresa is with the North Carolina Sustainable Economic Development, and it is Teresa, not Teresa. Teresa, so can you characterize this proposal for us?
Yes, and I'm with Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League, actually, but yes, I've been following this issue almost since its inception with the study group, and what was decided last Wednesday essentially was to keep a law that was put in place in 1945 that was designed for conventional gas and oil development, which is very different than the hydraulic fracturing that we're talking about today, and designed because to do just like you just mentioned, to protect landowners from folks, you know, from their next door neighbors sucking their resource out from under the ground, and that doesn't happen in a tight shale situation. So there's some real question about whether we even needed to retain this law or not. And what can happen now is that if your neighbors and the gas companies and the government decide that you're in a drilling unit and that they need your piece of the pie, so to speak, to make things more cost effective, to prevent wastefulness, as they say, they can force you into selling your resource. And as you mentioned, it's, you know, whether you want to or not, you know, for whatever reason you don't want to do it, whether you want to wait until the price goes up, whether you'd like to save that for your children or grandchildren, or whether you just don't, you know, have a moral reason for not doing so. And this study group could have recommended that we repeal the statute, and they did not do so. And they've just left the door wide open for, you know, for the oil and gas industry to come in and make people, you know, sell their gas whether they want to or not.
Now, at this point, this is just a non-binding proposal. It's not law. What steps need to be taken for this proposal to become law?
Well, my understanding is that some pieces of it will go to the full Mining and Energy Commission for incorporation into some of the rule sets that they're developing. But the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources will be taking the recommendation to our legislature. And it's anybody's guess, you know, what will happen at that point. Another thing I wanted to point out is that this does two things besides, you know, establishing the ability for this violation of property rights to occur. It also gives the landmen and the gas companies a big stick to approach people when they're considering whether they want to lease or not, to say, well, you know, you can either lease now or we can make you. And so it's just patently unfair. And you know, there's even folks who have leased their land to gas companies already who don't feel that it's right for them to be able to tell their neighbors what to do. So it's very sad. It was a very, very disturbing decision.
Now, the News and Observer newspaper, they said that this proposal has a very good chance of becoming law. What do you personally think?
Like I said, I think all bets are off. I would think it would be my feeling that conservatives in particular, property rights proponents and others, would be very, very concerned about this because, you know, eminent domain also comes along with the gas industry, but this is a little different because this is a private industry that is going to the government and using the might and the blessing of the government to take, you know, they do reimburse you, but to make you sell your resource whether you want to or not. And you know, you can't reimburse people for peace of mind. And you're talking about folks' home. And in Lee County in particular, even with the high recommended percentage, you're still talking about the few controlling the many. And it's just very concerning. I work pretty closely with landowners in that area.
Now, Therese, a major argument for fracking is that it will generate jobs in North Carolina. What is your response to this?
I feel like that argument is overblown. We have a small resource here. We have a small play. Additionally, a lot of the jobs are transient. There are folks who come into town and they do what they're here to do. They're contract workers. And when they're done, they leave. And so I don't feel, from what I've read and what I understood and what I studied, I don't feel it's going to be a long-lasting, if any, economic development strategy for North Carolina. And it's going to have negative costs such as road damage, infrastructure problems, social services, and so on, that may not be considered. And so it's really hard to think that it's going to be a big money maker for the state.
Thank you, Therese. That was Therese Vick live from Raleigh, North Carolina.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.